Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about quote integration, and our ratio of client's words to the paraphrasing or quote. So here's our example prompt just to remind you it's about the Hunger Games. So let's begin by talking about sources and evidence. Depending on the type of writing, the professor, and the assignment, there may be a variety of requirements about using sources. So, about the type of sources, about the number of sources, all of that could vary. So, always refer back to the assignment sheet if a client has brought one, or their syllabus or Brightspace page is a great place to look for that kind of information. Some professors or assignments will require only using paraphrasing or direct quotations, so make sure you know whether the client is allowed to use a mixture of the two or only one or the other. For example, in scientific writing, it's often thought that you are only supposed to use paraphrasing. However, I know for a fact that some professors will require the use of direct quotations in that format. So just be really careful that you're not telling the student incorrect information. And if you don't know and they don't know, have them reach out to the professor. Students will have a variety of approaches in finding their evidence. Some will have this be the first thing that they do in their writing process. They may build their paragraphs around the quotes or paraphrase that they pull, while others will make finding support or evidence the last step of their draft. So when integrating quotes, evidence should never just sort of appear and exist in the middle of a client's writing. It should be ideally sandwiched between their own words. So it should be sort of in the middle of maybe a three-sentence structure where the middle sentence is the paraphrase or quote, the sentence before is introducing that quote or paraphrase, and the final sentence explains how it connects to that client's ideas. So let's look at an example. So this is an example using a literary criticism. It says, in Death from All Sides, Spectacle, Morality, and Trauma, and Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Game Trilogy, Christine Moffat and Melody May argue, in the alternate world Collins creates, death and the threat of death are used as a central mechanism of control by the Capitol and its leader, President Snow. Using fear of death to control the masses is exactly what dictators often resort to. So here you can see the first part of this is introducing the quote in that person's own words, and the final part of it is connecting it to their ideas, while the middle part actually contains the quote. If a source is not introduced in sentence format the way that that previous example was, students will need an in-text citation after the evidence with anything that they missed. They will need to include any required information not stated in the sentence in parentheses at the very end of their quote or paraphrase. For many students, college is the first time they have to use in-text citations, and they may be really confused by them. So make sure that they know which style of citation they should be using. This includes APA, MLA, Chicago, and JAND. APA is generally used for the sciences, and particularly psychology. MLA is often used by the humanities, especially English. Chicago tends to be used mostly by history, and JAND is a nutrition studies style of citation. For additional help with in-text citations and citations in general, we have a lot of resources available at the Writing Center, so just ask around. So different types of writing will require different amounts of evidence or citations. Something like a literature review or research paper will be heavy on paraphrasing and quotes. Despite most of that content coming from outside sources, research papers and literature reviews cannot be entirely others' words. Students need to connect, analyze, and expand on their sources' ideas. A literary analysis, reflection, or other more opinion-based writing should use evidence intentionally, not just to pad paragraphs. So let's talk about that a little bit with this long quotes section. So a literary analysis, so these types of writing that are more evidence-based, it can be very tempting for students to resort to long quotes in order to make their paper feel longer. But if the quote is too long, sometimes it includes ideas that the student is not discussing or unnecessary and repeated content. A good rule of thumb is no more than 2 pieces of evidence per body paragraph for non-research writing. In more research-intensive writing, it may be that every 4 sentences of a 5 sentence paragraph is evidence. It really depends specifically assignment to assignment. In scenarios where students do need to use long quotes, make sure they brush up on what we call block quote citations. So that's if a quote spans more than 3 lines in the original text, it is a block quote. You often find this in more literary fields, especially with things like citing poetry because the lines are so spaced out. So let's look at an example of a block quote here. So here I've created a block quote example in the middle of a paragraph. So the first part and the final part of this writing would be the client's own words, and then the quote appears in the middle. You can see it is indented, and you can also see I've included an addition to the quote. So here in brackets, I put a word or words that I've added in order to make the quote make sense. This is a common tactic used when quoting. And you can also see that I've included an in-text citation in the MLA style, which would be last name of author and page number. So this is what a block quote should look like. And that's it for quotations.